Hello, hi everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. My name's Rob Doble. I'm the Director of Policy, Advocacy and Programs at Their World. And welcome to this key series event that is hosted by Their World and the Global Business Coalition for Education. For many of you, I'm sure you know, but if you don't, The Key is a fantastic resource that we published last year that's aimed to be a comprehensive toolkit that helps advocates like you make the case for education, linking with all those other important sectors and issues that we face. Today, I'm really pleased that our topic is looking at early childhood education in refugee contexts, and that's to mark World Refugee Day that just happened on June 20th, and to really particularly to talk about a fantastic new report that we're publishing this week. So I'm thrilled to be joined by two incredible speakers who will impart lots of wisdom and expertise during this time with us. So firstly, we'll be joined by Maysa Jalbout, who is a non-resident fellow at the Brookings Institution and a very well-recognized leader in international development and philanthropy, and is the fantastic, one of the lead authors on the new report. So we'll hear more about that in due course. And secondly is Ajrock Mary Valentino, who is one of our incredible global youth ambassadors. She's a 27-year-old campaigner from South Sudan who had her education disrupted. And she will talk to us very powerfully about what early childhood education means to her and why she campaigns on that issue. So without further ado, I'm going to get in some questions to Maysa and to Mary. I think I'm allowed to call you Mary, as friends do. But please, I would like to, before I do, I'd like to encourage you to put any of your questions into the chat. And we will have about 25 minutes or so of me asking some questions and some discussion. But then I would love to then hand over and put your questions to our speakers as well. All right, fantastic. So, Maysa, let's kick off with you. Could you start by telling me a little bit about this new report that you've published with us? Tell us a little bit about kind of the findings and the recommendations, and yeah, over to you.
Thanks so much, Rob, and thank you, Their World, for hosting this event and for commissioning this report. I think it's very, very timely. As many of the folks who have joined us today will know, this is World Refugee Week 2021, and there has been a lot of talk about the refugee crisis, the numbers that have been going up. We're about 82 million people now of people who have been displaced, even during COVID. And I think it's so incredibly important that when we're talking about refugees, that we do not forget about education. And in particular, I'm really just so honored that we're focused on early childhood education in this report, and we are trying to get the message across that we must not forget about the youngest refugees. So the reason that Their World commissioned this report is essentially to shed light on the fact that while the world and the donors, private as well as aid agencies, have been putting an increased emphasis and have been increasing support to refugee education, unfortunately, we are not seeing that translate in benefits for the youngest refugees. So, you know, credit where credit is due, this year is the 5th anniversary of Education Cannot Wait, which Their World and other organizations helped lobby to create, and it has now mobilized almost $700 million for refugee education. But a very small percentage of that is going to young children, because the whole response to refugee education remains extremely underfunded. Now, also very important that the humanitarian responses, or the humanitarian plans that are responding to crisis, are not emphasizing the need to support early childhood education. Over the last couple of years, with 26 official humanitarian responses by the United Nations and other organizations, only a small fraction of those included early childhood education as part of that response. Yet the irony in all of this is that we already know, we have the evidence to show that early childhood education is crucial to the development and protection of these children. The benefits to them as children, as all children in the world, are immense. We know that those years from 3 to 6 are crucial to their learning outcomes, are crucial to their economic outcomes over the long term. We know that every year invested in a young child, particularly from a disadvantaged background, from a low-income country, increases their income year on year by 10%. So we know the benefits, but we know that we are not actually putting the emphasis and the support where it needs to be. So this report essentially was commissioned to shed light on that. But as we went looking for what is happening around the world on early childhood education in refugee settings, we found that there was, very little. It was disconnected. And the organizations that were delivering early childhood education were doing so with very few resources, with very few support from the global community. And oftentimes, those who were struggling the most in delivering that education were the teachers. And by teachers, we're referring to primarily community workers, often refugees themselves, who had very little support in the way of resources and tools to support the children that they were trying to help educate. And this is so illogical and heartbreaking on so many levels, because these children are often traumatized, have come from emergency situations, from conflict settings, and yet these teachers are desperate to help them, to help them overcome these challenges, but they don't have the resources or tools or support, and they're often, of course, unpaid or underpaid. So what the report did is really uncover all of that and bring it forth in very clear terms. There's very little that is happening, and we need to change that. But Rob, also, I don't want to spoil it, but there's also good news. And the good news is that the solutions are not that difficult. And I'll stop there and would love to talk about what the world can do and what everyone who's listening can help us do.
What a brilliant introduction. Thank you. It's, as you say, it's in some ways so heartbreaking, and kind of when you see that actually the evidence is there, but the funding and the action isn't following suit. But I love that you've left us on the edge of our seats waiting for the solution. So we'll look forward to coming back to that. Mary, can you tell us a little bit about your educational experience and having any of the pieces that Mesa described there? Do they resonate with you and anything you've experienced? Can you hear us okay, Mary?
Yes, thank you so much. I hope you can get me.
We can hear you well. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, can you get me?
We can hear you, Mary. Can you hear us? I think maybe your connection
Thank you,
might be...
everyone. My name is Ajok Mary Valentino. I'm a South Sudanese, and I live in Uganda as a refugee. I can get you.
Perfect, Mary. Can you tell us a
I've
little
been
bit
in
more about
Uganda
your
for the
experience?
last 17 years now, and my experience with early childhood education, I was not exposed to early childhood education, and I got to know about education or school at the age of 9. While in South Sudan, at a little age, my parents were internally displaced due to the war that was going on in South Sudan. And as a result, being in IDPs, I was not exposed to any education. And in 2003, my parents had to leave South Sudan to Uganda as refugees. And there I didn't even have opportunity to study. Much as Uganda has an open door policy to refugees, it really does not guarantee access to quality education for everyone. And so 2003, I was at home. And in 2004, I was picked by the Catholic Missionary School to go to a boarding school. And that is how I got lucky to attend to early primary school.
Amazing. Fantastic. Thank you, Mary. I think we'll come back and hear a little bit more about
I hope
your
I'm not
experience.
disconnected.
Oh, no, I think we heard you well. Do you have more you want to offer? I think if it's okay, Mary, we'll come back to you in a second, and I will ask Mesa to kind of to follow up, because I think what we'd love to hear a little bit more about is the kind of social and emotional skills that can be developed through early childhood. So Mesa, I'll come back to you. So kind of beyond education, school is a place where children develop socially and emotionally. Can you talk through kind of some of those wider benefits to ensuring all children are at school kind of from that youngest age? You talked a bit about that evidence there and that science. Can you talk us through what some of those benefits look like?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sure Mary has a lot to say about that as well, and hopefully we can hear her better. But I mean, look, I think that we often don't necessarily equate early childhood education with anything more than it is an opportunity to prepare children for the learning that is to happen in primary education and beyond. And of course, we have tons of evidence now and research to show that you know, there is a tremendous amount of growth that happens in the 0 to 6 years. The brain is developing so quickly, and the potential for learning is enormous in those years. So it's an opportunity not to be missed for any child anywhere in the world. But if you take the fact that only half of the world's youngest children are actually enrolled in pre-primary education, and when you think about the context of the least developed countries, that number is sometimes as low as 20%. Now, for refugee communities, that varies widely, but is often extremely low. What that does is it doesn't only deprive them from the potential of that learning opportunity, but it also deprives them from the potential that education can give them to heal, to offer them the kind of programming that, if supported, if teachers are supported, can provide that psychosocial counseling, that healthy, protective environment, safe environment where they can use play to help children express their emotions, share their fears, and start building out their aspirations and their ways of expressing themselves and communicating their needs effectively. When anytime I've been on the ground, and I've been on the ground visiting refugee sites with Their World for many years, we're often told in refugee communities, in refugee camps, by those teachers, by parents of children, young children, that, my child is suffering, they're not speaking, or they are not communicating, they're withdrawn, they're not able to participate. And the only thing that's helping them is when they are in this safe environment, when they are removed from the traumatic situations of refugee camps into these healthier spaces and supported by children. So it's the psychosocial support that is so essential to their growth. And make no mistake, if these issues are not addressed early on, we know that translates into bigger challenges as those children grow up. The challenges that manifest themselves in lower learning outcomes, but also in other challenges in mental and health and physical issues that remain with them for life, and that result in lower productivity, lower ability to integrate into society. And so, early childhood education is one of those things that is often misunderstood and not necessarily prioritized because it's seen as a luxury. But what we're here to say is that it's crucial. It's necessary for a healthy upbringing and for a healthy life. So it's a short-term investment for a very long-term result.
Yeah, hear, hear. So Mary, I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to ask you, I know as well as the fantastic campaigning work you do a lot of work in a refugee settlement where you are working, I think, on supporting social and emotional development of refugee children. Can you tell us a little bit about that work and what that looks like?
Thank you. In 2017, I took up a teaching job with Window Trust Uganda. I didn't have experience in actually delivering content on early childhood education. I was just in my high school vacation. And from there, dealing with refugees in remote areas, I learned the stress that children really go through. Teachers were so few, like two teachers, handling 3 classes of children who are more than 500 in a class. And at the end of the day, these teachers are also refugees who sometimes go for food distribution and maybe don't turn up for the whole day. Or maybe one teacher turns up and then all the children are combined in one class and given the same content. And actually, the children in early childhood kind of setting are not the age of 0 maybe to 6. We were having children who are over even 15 years old in those classes. I was teaching in primary 3, primary 4, and I had children who were over 20 years old in those classes. And I realized that others were really not, others were stressed, others were not following up because they were sitting with children who were younger than them, and they were looking at themselves as older children and completely were not so comfortable in class. So currently, I work with We Take a Peace and Development Initiative, and there we offer counseling and trauma healing sessions. We follow to refugee communities or in clusters, and we have trainers of trainees, whom we call TOTs, who are trained to also offer these opportunities to their fellow refugees in the communities. Whereas we offer these activities, every child actually does not get opportunity to benefit from them. Only a few children get these opportunities. As one way also of promoting peace in the refugee camp, we do sports a lot. We have over 16 football teams for both girls and boys. And most of them actually are school dropouts. And one of the reasons is to encourage them to participate in sports, to nourish their talent. Yes, and it's one way in the other, like it's helping them relieve their stress and also socially helping them to live with one another. And then we also do movie screening, cinemas. We get them to watch movies of other children and also get to see the life that actually as refugee children do not get access to. And they also get to learn of what other children are doing, maybe in sports, in other parts of the world. And with that, we're trying to give them not only inspiration, but kind of relieving their stress when they watch also other movies. And at the end of the sessions, we bring them together and get the lessons that they pick up from such movies. And then lastly, we also do conflict mediation. Children sometimes during their games and sports activities, they get into conflict, even in schools. So one of the ways that we're trying to handle social conflicts and their emotions is to come in and mediate their conflicts, even in schools and the neighborhood, especially at the boreholes, water points. They get to fight and schools, and we come in and try to solve these issues. So that is briefly the work I do and try to kind of promote social and emotional development among refugee children.
It's brilliant. Thank you so much, Mary. Sorry, I think I'm getting an echo back. It's wonderful to hear your experiences, both the realities of the challenges of who gets access and who doesn't, and the kind of overcrowding, but also the real power of what those interventions can really look like and what they can offer. So I know we've talked quite a lot about the challenges, what's not happening. Mesa, you said we've got some fantastic solutions that are not too complicated. So I wanted to pivot us now to think positive and to kind of communicate to our guests what can happen. Where does change start? What is it that governments, international institutions, and individuals can do to actually ensure that conflict and displacement doesn't disrupt early childhood education? And Mesa, I'll come to you first, and then Mary, I'd then love to hear your thoughts afterwards. So Mesa, over to you. How do we change this?
Well, Mary set it up for me so well. What we want to do in a nutshell is to get support to amazing teachers, the heroes on the ground like Mary, so that they have the tools, that they have the support and the network to actually do the critical work of helping these children overcome the challenges that they're facing, and to do the best possible preparation for the learning that they hopefully will be able to access. And so very simply, we are urging the international community to start paying attention to teachers, to community workers, to parents of young children in refugee settings. And we have 4 simple solutions. The first one is that we would like to make the science of the brain science of early childhood available to all teachers, and especially teachers who are working in refugee settings. We want to make it accessible. We want to make it relevant to their context, because teaching in a refugee situation is not like teaching in a well-equipped school in a safe environment, where you have the community and the parents' ability to focus on their children. Oftentimes, as Mary and many others told us when we were writing the report, they're improvising. They're acting on the spot without any of that resources. So make the science of early childhood available and accessible. We already know some of these tools and resources that are available and that are phenomenal, but they're targeting countries that have the ability to access these resources, have the internet access to be able to take degrees online and MOOCs, and are funded by government, of course. So we want to make it accessible, adaptable. We want to translate this content and make it available in small, easily downloadable formats. And we think we can do this in a very short period of time by focusing on the communities where we have the highest number of young refugee children, and those, we know where those spots are. We know that the nonprofit organizations that are operating there and the governments that are hosting those refugees are willing and able to support the delivery of this. And we can do this at a global level. One of the things that we heard as part of this report is that we're not looking for some international standard. We're not looking for some uniform degree that is delivered by an institute, a university in the north. We're looking for content that can be made accessible and very user friendly. And that's what we intend to do. That's number one. Number two, we heard from everyone that teachers, professionals like Mary have a wealth of knowledge and experience to offer, and we need to take into account their prior learning experience, their contextual experience as part of that. And so we are proposing that we partner up with technical vocational institutions in countries with high refugee populations to deliver training, very practical training that is built with short modules and is offered in refugee settings, but also results in a certificate that can recognize the learning and the training and the effort put in by these teachers, by these professionals in the communities. That's number two. Number three, we also know the world over, teachers working with young children, teachers working with children of all ages benefit the most when they hear other teachers' experiences, not necessarily when they're sitting just in a classroom and being lectured at. So we want to create a community, a place for teachers working with refugees to connect with each other, a platform that connects them so that a teacher sitting in Zaatari camp in Jordan, struggling with an issue or trying to figure out what content she can use to support the children in that camp in Arabic language, can connect with another teacher in Jordan, or maybe sitting in Greece working with Syrian children, refugee children on the Greek islands. They can connect, they can share experiences, they can upload some of those modules. We're seeing this happen now for teachers around the world, and it's hugely successful and is having major impact, and the feedback from teachers is very positive. So we want to make that accessible to teachers working in refugee settings. That's number three. Number four, finally, is that as we went looking for the evidence, we found that there wasn't much of it. Because the organizations that are delivering the early childhood education are doing it with very few resources, and those resources are not public knowledge, and there is no investment in evaluation and in public knowledge. So we would want to follow the experiences of people like Mary and others, document that and share that, because it is really crucial for us to understand what works on the ground. And this is, donors should love this, because the idea is that the dollars that they would invest can then actually track that impact, and we start building on those experiences on the ground. So those are the 4 proposals that are outlined in the report. I encourage everyone to download the report so they can hear a little more in detail. And of course, we're very happy to answer questions. My co-author and I, Katie Bullard, shout out to her in Washington, D.C., would be very happy to follow up with anyone interested in learning more. And of course, answering questions here today.
Brilliant. I love it. That's exactly what we love doing here at Their World, is kind of identifying a problem, but then putting together a really clear roadmap for how it can be addressed. So 4 very clear points, but you're absolutely right. We can't do this alone, and we're really excited to talk with all of you about how we partner and make this happen. Mary, I'd love to bring you in and ask you the same question. So thinking about where does change start? What can we do? What are the kind of interventions or the things that you get really excited about? And then I can see we've got some fantastic questions coming in from the audience. So I'll then switch to putting some of your questions to our speakers. So over to you, Mary. Oh, can you hear us, Mary? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, may you pardon, please? I wasn't getting you well.
That's okay. I know the connection is challenging. I just wanted to ask where you think change starts. What do you get excited about here? How do we fix this?
All right. Thank you. Personally, I really think that change starts when we feel uncomfortable of a situation at hand and we have the zeal to do something about it. Change is a gradual process, I know, but it's a necessary thing. And there is always an opportunity, a room to create a change. And it's always not really too late, to address a situation. So what really governments or institutions and individuals can really do to address such issues? Personally, I think governments like South Sudan, where I come from, should try as much as possible to establish sustainable peace, because it's only through peace that children get access to actually education. When I compare the difference between the children from South Sudan and in other countries like Uganda currently, the children actually are lacking behind. They are at a little bit older age, like someone in 20, but still in lower primary, compared to countries where actually there is peace. So one thing that I would really encourage governments is that they should try as much as possible to establish sustainable peace, to give at least development, and that includes education for children. And then they should also try as much as possible to prioritize education. International institutions that are trying to care for the refugees, we are so grateful that they're trying their level best to give refugee children access to education. Though it's not really quality that these children do not have the opportunity to compete with the children that have access to, to quality education in towns. I was lucky to have gone to a school out of refugee setting. And from experience, whenever I would come back for holidays, at least 1 or 2 of my friends kept dropping out of school. And today, most of them are young mothers, but I'm still in school because I got opportunities. Some people invested in me. So they should prioritize early childhood education that would actually set up a pace for the development of a child's life. And then to the individuals out there, it is the little things that really we do that matter, that make a difference. Continue to do the little things that you can do to make a change. Your contribution and your voice to advocate for the rights of children and early childhood education in particular counts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. Yeah, you're absolutely right, isn't it? When we feel that little bit uncomfortable, that's when we know we're pushing on something important. And you're absolutely right that we can all take little steps, and they can make up a big difference. I can see we've got some fantastic questions here, so I'm going to turn to these from our audience. So, firstly, there's a question really around kind of a two-part question, which is about how can we get governments to actually prioritize and fund pre-primary education? So, question of first part is, why do we think this isn't happening at the moment? Why are governments not doing this? And the second part is, what can we do to actually make them prioritize this more? So I will open up to either Mesa or Mary, whoever wants to jump in and take that one.
Mary, would you like to go?
Okay. Okay, what can people actually, how can people put pressure on governments to fund pre-primary school, right? Education.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like in Uganda here, according to my research, actually, I found out that out of the budget that is allocated to education sector, only 2%, was allocated to early childhood education. And much of the early childhood education here is actually in the private sector. So when you see in villages or remote areas and refugees where government like operate, these children do not have access to quality education where the children in private schools get. So I think one way for us really to give pressure for the governments actually to be accountable to the citizens or to the people they serve is speaking up, advocating, like what we're doing now is one way to put pressure on them. Yes, social media is a very powerful tool. We could come up with some campaigns on social media and do that. And of course, I think that would really, really work according to me. And when we have that pressure on them, then they would also do something. And then one thing I really think is to monitor and reinforce some of these policies. We have policies put in place to promote early childhood education, like in Uganda here, but they remain on papers sometimes because not every child gets access to quality education through these policies. So I think the implementation of these policies should be monitored and reinforcement should be put really in place to see that governments take action and listen to the people and address some of these issues for the development of every child.
Perfect. That's great, Mary.
Yeah, thank you.
I couldn't agree with you more on the accountability, and you've kind of also nicely teed up for me to give a little plug to another report that will come out in July, which is an updated version of our report called Leaving the Youngest Behind, which is a donor scorecard of how much donors are investing in early childhood education. Because unless we actually see those figures, show those figures, and see actually, is it enough? Who's doing well? Who's not doing so well? We can't hold governments to account. So yeah. Mesa, is there anything you want to add in on how we hold governments to account and get them to prioritize this more?
Mary said it beautifully. I think the first thing that we should be doing is elevating voices like hers, voices of people who are refugees and are experiencing the consequences of lack of early childhood education. I think, Rob, the report that you are working on is going to be so crucial. I mean, the number one thing that it, to me, highlights is that education is the right of every child, refugee or not. It is enshrined in the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And most donors are signatories to that convention. And refugee children should not be left behind. We need to remind everyone of that, of course. But On a practical level, we need to remember, we need to remind donors that the investment in early childhood education is an investment that protects their overall investment in the humanitarian context as well as in education. It is crucial, and we need to, with the research that we're proposing to do, highlight the fact that we have practical methods to delivering. We have the evidence and support and the measures to put in place to show the kind of progress we can be making by investing in early childhood education. So plug to number 4 on the list there. And then finally, and I think this is so crucial, and we've done this in other Their World reports, is that we cannot forget that children in host communities, in communities where refugee children are being hosted. So an example would be Lebanon or Jordan, where the children from those countries themselves are also not accessing early childhood education at the level that they should be accessing. So we need to support host communities at the same time and elevate, the entire society there. But at the end of the day, I think that it's going to require a group effort. And I just want to say that, when I say we, I say really it is the collective we. Their World is not going to do this on their own. They cannot. What we need is donor governments, we need philanthropic entities, we need individuals, we need advocates, we need young people, everyone to come together in support of this cause. And I think it's very, very doable. And we're being very realistic about what we want to accomplish. And we're suggesting a very phased approach for these 4 priorities, with a focus first and foremost on making the tools available and being able to do that in a very scalable way using technology that is appropriate for the context.
Exactly. No, that's brilliant. And I think there are some fantastic, coalitions and organizations that are really starting to mobilize around this, with the Moving Minds Alliance and partners involved there, and the Early Childhood Development Action Network. And so I think it's good. It's an issue that is coming to the fore. And I think if we can build a strong kind of rallying cry and kind of really join hands around this, then we can put that pressure on. I think we might have time to squeeze in one more question, if that's okay. And then I want to be respectful of people's time, as we have a video to close out the session. But the question is about particularly, I think, recommendation 2 there on TVET institutions. Macy, could you tell us a little bit more about why we picked out TVET institutions? And if we have time, we'll come to you, Mary, to see how that would work in your context as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that the approach of using TVET is not one that we, as researchers and education advocacy community, often highlight as a mechanism for delivery. But in fact, what we found here was that this is really an under-tapped possibility, because it is relevant for the community of professionals, of volunteers, of refugees that we're trying to reach. When we spoke to researchers, often sitting in very important universities, it was very clear that the type of curriculum that they were delivering required qualifications that were often not present among this professional community that we are trying to support. Language requirements were too high. They often needed to have not just a high school education, but an undergraduate degree to be able to take that master's that specializes in supporting children that come with learning difficulties, trauma, etc. So we went to the idea of technical vocational institutions because they are localized, because they can provide the opportunity for these professionals, these teachers, to work and study. It can be contextualized, and it can be delivered in the language of their home country. And of course, often TVET institutions are recognized by their host country, therefore offering the possibility of providing a relevant credential for the teachers that we're trying to target. I'd love to hear what Mary thinks.
Yeah. Mary, what do you think? How do TVET institutions work where you are?
Thank you. Personally, there are so many organizations within the refugee settlements that are trying to bring this, and mostly they deal with the youth and women groups from experience, and most of the skills that they're trying to impact on these categories of people are basic skills like bakery, for instance, carpentry, something like craft and art, something of like that, painting, and some few of that design. So I think that would really work. What she shared is very important. And one thing that also these institutions, the organizations always try to give skills to these categories of people. But at the end of the day, the beneficiaries are left without actually practicing these skills. Like you give someone a skill, but at the end of the day, you don't give them the tools or equipment to use their skills for. So actually, the skill becomes useless without experience. And I think that is also one thing that most organizations should consider, that besides giving only a skill to this person, try also to support this person and give something to start from, or where to start from actually, to have experience in that field that you're trying to impact the person with. So it's a very important thing. We have so many school dropouts, youth and women groups, and such technical vocational institutions would really be of great importance to them.
Spot on, Mary. That's absolutely right, isn't it? It's not just about providing the skills, but really that support to put them into practice. And I think that's also where it tees up nicely to the third recommendation, thinking about the community of practice. How does that work? Great. I'm going to close things there. Thank you so much, Mosa and Mary. It's given me so much joy to be with you, and it's really given me a lot of inspiration and hope that we can change this. We can really put this into practice. And thank you very much to all of you for joining us wherever you are around the world. We really appreciate you logging in and following, and we really look forward to working with you on this. I think there will be a short video about the key that will close out, but I'll close things there and say thank you very much, and yeah.